The morning began with that annoying sound I'd heard for the third day in a row, the drip, 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 drip of the kitchen faucet. The water was falling into the sink with annoying regularity, as if counting down the seconds of my patience. I tried turning the valve again, but it was no use. The faucet was leaking like it was mocking me. I got up at 7 in the morning, as usual. In the 8 years since Arturo's death, I'd developed a strict routine. Rise, shower, breakfast with a cup of strong coffee, and a look out the window at the small garden where the tomatoes and peppers grew. Arturo always said that a mistress should know what was going on in her domain, even if that domain was just a patch of land the size of a handkerchief. But today that damned faucet was giving me no peace of mind. I had tried everything, and tightened the valve, and knocked on it with a wooden spoon, as my late mother had taught me. Nothing helped. The drops fell with the same persistent regularity as my thoughts about how quickly everything in this house was falling into disrepair. I'd gotten the house from my parents 30 years ago. It seemed sturdy and solid then, thick brick walls, high ceilings, spacious rooms. But the years took their toll. The roof started leaking after the rainy season, the pipes clogged, the electrics malfunctioned. Arturo had done some minor repairs when he was alive, but after he died, all these problems fell on my shoulders. I had to call Raimundo. My younger brother had always been a handyman, unlike my late husband, who couldn't even hammer a nail without my help. Arturo was a good man, kind and caring, but his hands were in the wrong place. Raimundo, on the other hand, loved to tinker with machinery. I remember him taking apart his grandfather's old clock when he was 12 and putting it back together so that it worked for another 10 years. "Raimundo," I said when he answered the phone, "it's that faucet again. Can you come over? What's the first time this month?" He laughed. "Adelaide, I told you it was time to change all the plumbing. These faucets are 20 years old at least. Just come over," I sighed. "I don't have the money for new plumbing." That was true. My seamstress's pension was small. It was enough for food, utilities, and the most basic medications. It took months to save up for the big expenses, and prices had risen so much in recent years that sometimes I wondered how people managed to survive. Raimundo had promised to arrive in the afternoon, but he showed up at 10:30 in the morning with a tattered box of tools in his hands. He was always punctual, even too punctual. Mom used to joke that he was born with a clock in his head. "That faucet again?" he asked without even saying hello. "Adelaide, I told you last year? It's time to change all the plumbing in this house." "Don't lecture me," I shrugged him off, pouring coffee into his favorite blue cup. "Just fix what you can." The blue cup was special. Raimundo had given it to me for my birthday about 5 years ago. A simple ceramic cup with painted forget-me-nots, but I loved it. Raimundo always drank coffee only from it when he came to visit. Raimundo sat under the sink, sniffling and muttering something about old pipes. His work pants had long since lost their original color, and his t-shirt had oil stains on it. He looked a sturdy man in his 58 years, though gray hair had already silvered his temples. A bachelor by conviction, as he liked to say, though I suspected he hadn't met the right woman, or maybe he had, but something hadn't worked out. Raimundo didn't like to talk about his personal life. I only know that about 20 years ago he had some history with a woman from a neighboring town, but then everything ended abruptly. Since then, he lived alone in his apartment, worked as a locksmith in the public utility, and helped all his relatives and neighbors with repairs. "The gasket is all worn out," he said from under the sink. "Good thing I have a spare, otherwise I'd have to go to the store, and they charge as much as a live one." I sat at the table, watching him wield the wrench. The house was silent in the morning, broken only by the tinkling of tools and the occasional grunt of Raimundo. The sun shone through the curtains on the kitchen window, illuminating the dusty particles in the air. An ordinary morning in my ordinary life. These curtains I'd sewn myself back in Arturo's time, light yellow fabric with a small floral pattern. At the time, I thought they made the kitchen look cozy. Now they looked old-fashioned, but I didn't want to change. Like so much else in this house, they were part of my history. "You know," Raimundo said, sticking his head out from under the sink and wiping his hands with a rag, "maybe you should think about my offer. We've had this discussion about 5 times in the last 6 months." Raimundo didn't think I should live alone in this house after Arturo died. He suggested I move in with him, to his apartment on the next block. His apartment was small but cozy, overlooking the central square. 2 of the windows faced St. Martin's Church, and on Sundays you could hear the bells ringing from the comfort of your own home. Raimundo, we talked about this. I sighed. This house is my home. My whole life is here. Your life, he hummed, getting under the sink again. Adelaide, you're 62 years old. What are you doing here? Talking to your neighbor Esperanza, going to the store, watching TV? That's not living, that's existence. His words stung, though I didn't show it. Maybe he was partly right. Since Arturo's death, the days have been the same. I get up at 7 in the morning, eat breakfast, clean, make lunch, meet Esperanza, watch soap operas in the evenings. But is that bad? Is a quiet, measured life a judgment? Of course, there are days when I get bored, especially in the evenings when the sun went down and the house was too quiet. That's when I felt Arturo's absence most keenly. We'd lived together for 28 years, and in that time we'd gotten used to talking about everything. About work, about neighbors, about weekend plans. Now I had no one to share my thoughts with except Esperanza, but I didn't see her every day. I have my routine, I said. I like my house, my garden, my neighbors. Why should I change it? Because you are a young woman. Raimundo got out from under the sink and looked at me seriously. You could be traveling, meeting someone, starting a new life. Instead, you sit in 4 walls, like a nun in a cell. Traveling. It was funny coming from a man who'd never traveled further than the capital in his entire life. But I knew what he meant. After Arturo died, I really became a recluse. Before, my husband and I would sometimes go to visit relatives in other cities, go to the theater, see friends. Now my world has shrunk to the size of this house and the immediate neighborhood. To meet someone, the thought seemed completely unreal to me. Where and how? At my age, in a town where everyone had known each other since childhood. And did I really want to? Sometimes I thought that 1 dose of love in life was enough. Arturo was a good husband, and I wasn't sure I could love anyone else. You know, Raimundo continued, unscrewing something under the sink, I met Rosalia Contreras at the store yesterday. Do you remember her? She worked in the same factory as you. I remembered Rosalia. We were friends when we were young, but after we got married, we went our separate ways. She moved to the capital, worked in a big atelier there. She's recently moved back here, my brother continued. Her husband died a year ago and the children live in America. So she bought a small house near the park and says she feels happy. She goes to senior citizens dances and has enrolled in a French course. French? I was surprised. Why would she need French at our age? Why would you sit at home and listen to a dripping faucet at our age? Raimundo parried. I put his cup in the sink without answering. Raimundo didn't realize that for me this house was not a prison, but a refuge. Here I felt safe. Here were the memories of happy years with Arturo. Here every corner was imbued with our shared history. Why would I look for something new when I had something tried and trusted? In the bedroom was our old bed, the one we'd slept on for 28 years. In the closet hung dresses that I sewed myself or bought for the holidays. In the living room, on the dresser were pictures of our wedding, Emiliano's birthday, and family holidays. Each thing told a story, and I wasn't ready to part with those stories. Try it now, Raimundo said, turning on the faucet. The water came in a steady stream, without a single drop passed. The sound was clear, without that nasty gurgling sound that annoyed me. Raimundo always knew how to fix things so they worked better than new. Thank you, I said sincerely. How much do I owe you? Don't be silly, he said, gathering up his tools. I'm not a stranger. Raimundo always refused to take money for minor repairs, even though I knew his locksmith's pension wasn't that big. He was a proud man, like all the men in our family. Dad was the same way. He never borrowed money, always paid it off at once. Dead as chains on your feet, he used to say. But I still tried to thank my brother in my own way. Cooked him his favorite dishes when he came to visit. I gave him something useful for his birthday, new work gloves or a coffee thermos. Little things, but from the heart. Why don't you stay for dinner? I suggested it. I'll make your favorite bean soup. Raimundo loved my bean soup more than anything. I made it according to our mother's recipe, with smoked meat, onions, and a special seasoning I bought from old Senora Gomez at the market. The secret was to soak the beans overnight and then cook them over low heat for several hours. I can't. Raimundo shook his head. I have 2 more summons today. Old Senora Moreno is complaining about the radiators again, and Don Carlos's water heater is not working at all. Raimundo was a very conscientious worker. He had never had a single complaint in all the years he had worked for the utility. He was on time for calls, worked carefully, and never overcharged. Everyone in our town knew him and trusted him. People would wait for his shift so that he could be the one to fix their problems. This is the 3rd time this month that Senora Moreno has called me, he complained as he zipped up his toolbox. Her batteries are from the Soviet Union, 40 years old, but she doesn't want to change them. She keeps asking for tweaks and adjustments, and in the winter, she complains that it's cold at home. What about Don Carlos? I asked. Don Carlos is a separate story, Raimundo sighed. He tried to fix the water heater himself, unscrewing something. Now the water doesn't heat at all. It's going to take half a day to figure out what he did. He headed for the door, but turned around at the door. Think about my offer, Adelaide. Think seriously. Life is too short to waste on loneliness. After he left, I was left alone in the kitchen with a fixed faucet and thoughts of what a good life was. Raimundo thought I was wasting my time, but is taking care of the house, the garden, interacting with neighbors a waste of time? Isn't a calm, quiet life without stress or upheaval a good thing? I went into the living room, sat in my favorite chair by the window, and turned on the morning news. The announcer was talking about some political events in the capital, but I listened half-heartedly. My thoughts still swirled around Raimundo's words. Did my life really look so empty and meaningless from the outside? I looked around. The living room was small but cozy. An old couch with faded cushions I'd embroidered myself in the early years of my marriage. A dresser with pictures of the family, our wedding, Emiliano's baptism, birthdays, holidays, the television that Arturo had bought 5 years ago with his last paycheck. Everything was familiar, native, our own. On the wall hung a picture of our parents, Mom and Dad on their silver wedding day. Mom in a beautiful dark blue dress, Dad in a strict suit. They lived together for 43 years and died 6 months apart. Mom always said that the most important thing in life is family and home. Maybe that's why it's so hard for me to imagine life outside of these walls. Is it so bad to live in a familiar world where everything has its place and its story, where I know what time the sun rises and when the cuckoo in my neighbor's garden begins to cuckoo? Where each day brings small joys. A cup of morning coffee, a conversation with Esperanza, an evening TV show. On the other hand, Raimundo's words about Rosalia hooked me. French at 60, dancing for the elderly. Sounds strange, but intriguing at the same time. What if I try something new? Not move in with your brother, but at least change your daily routine? You could join a library, start reading more books, or find some kind of hobby club. In our town, there is a gardening club that meets once a week. You could share your experience growing tomatoes and learn something new about flowers. Or maybe we could really try to get away. Go to my cousin in the capital, who has been inviting me to visit for 5 years now. Or go to the theater. In our city theater, sometimes there are good performances. I got up from the chair and went to the window. There was the usual everyday life in the street. Senora Vasquez, a neighbor, was watering the flowers in the front garden. A young mother was carrying a stroller with a baby. Old Don Pedro walked slowly with his cane to the store. Everything was the same as always, all familiar and quiet. But suddenly, I wanted to leave the house, not to go to the store or to Esperanza, but just for a walk through the unfamiliar streets. To see the city from a different perspective, to go to a cafe I'd never visited, to talk to people I didn't know. Strange thoughts for a woman who has been living on a strict schedule for 8 years. The phone rang around noon as I was preparing a light lunch. Emiliano's name popped up on the screen. My son didn't call that often, once a week, sometimes less often. Our conversations were usually short. How are you doing? How's your health? What's new? I knew that Meralda did not approve of these calls, considered them a waste of time. Emiliano had changed since his marriage. He used to be more open, able to call just to talk, to tell me about work or ask for advice. Now our conversations have become formal, as if he were performing an unpleasant duty. "Mom?" Emiliano's voice sounded strained. "We're in trouble." My heart clenched. When grown children start a conversation with a phrase about problems, it never bodes well. I turned off the stove and sat down at the table, preparing for the worst. "What's wrong?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "We got kicked out of the apartment," he said, and I heard him sigh heavily. "The landlord changed the locks while we were at work. We came home and the keys didn't fit." "What do you mean, kicked out?" I didn't understand. "You were paying rent." The silence in the phone was more eloquent than any words. I was beginning to realize what was going on, but I hoped I was wrong. "Mom, we owe 3 months' rent," Emiliano finally admitted. "I have problems at work, my paycheck is late, and Meralda's store has cut back on hours. We tried to negotiate with the owner, but he wouldn't listen." I sat in the kitchen, holding the phone and trying to digest what I'd heard. Emiliano had never been particularly responsible, but to come to this. 3 months of rent arrears is serious. It means they've been in trouble for a long time, but they haven't said anything, hoping to work it out on their own somehow. "Why didn't you tell me before?" I asked. "I could have helped." "Mom, you don't have any money yourself," my son replied tiredly. "And Meralda didn't want to. She said we'd take care of it ourselves." Of course, Meralda. She was always proud. She didn't like to ask for help. But pride is a good thing when you have something to fall back on. And when there's no money for rent, pride becomes a luxury. "Where are you now?" I asked. We're standing in the driveway?" My son's voice sounded tired and confused. "Meralda is crying. The neighbors are watching. We have a car with our things in it, which we had time to pick up this morning." "But where are we going to sleep?" "Mom, I don't know what to do." In the voice of a grown man of 35, I heard the intonation of a little boy who came home with a broken knee. Emiliano had always been like that, lost in critical situations, unsure of how to act. Arturo said it would pass with age, but it didn't. "We have only the money we have in our pockets," he continued. "Not even enough for a hotel for one night. And there are no friends to stay with." "There are none." That last phrase sounded especially sad. So they hadn't made any close friends in 3 years of marriage. I didn't hesitate for a second. Whatever the circumstances, whatever mistakes my son had made, he was still my son. And if he needed help, I couldn't say no. Family is family, as the late Arturo used to say. "Come and live with me," I said. "You can stay until you find a new place to live." "Mom, are you sure?" There was hope in Emiliano's voice. "We don't want to burden you, and Meralda is afraid we'll disturb your peace." "Peace? That's funny. This morning Raimundo said I had too much peace, and now my son and daughter-in-law are going to disturb it." "Don't be silly," I cut him off. "Family is family. Pack up and come over. I'll make dinner." "Thank you, Mom." Emiliano's voice trembled. "We'll be there in an hour. And Mom, forgive us for all this." After I hung up, the house was very quiet. I stood in the kitchen, looking at the fixed faucet, and thought about how quickly life can change. I had pondered my quiet solitude earlier in the morning, and now I was preparing to receive my son and daughter-in-law, Emiliano and Meralda. I couldn't say I knew my daughter-in-law well. They had married 3 years ago, but we rarely met. At the wedding, at Emiliano's birthday, a couple times at the holidays. Meralda was always polite but cold. I felt she thought I was an old-fashioned hick, though she never said so directly. She worked as a clerk in a cosmetics store downtown, a beautiful, well-groomed girl with ambition. It seemed to me that she had chosen Emiliano not out of love, but out of calculation. She needed a man who would provide for her, but Emiliano wasn't as reliable a provider as she'd hoped. Now they needed help, and I was ready to give it. Not because I approved of their lifestyle or their financial irresponsibility, just because they're family. And family is sacred, just like my mom taught me. I started cooking dinner for 4 instead of 1, thinking about where they would sleep. I'll have to give them my bedroom. It's the biggest and most comfortable. I'd move into the small room Arturo and I used as a closet. There was an old bed where the guests slept, I'll have to make room in the closet, put away my personal belongings. They arrived exactly an hour later, as promised. I heard the sound of a car in the yard and looked out the window. Emiliano's old sedan stopped at the gate. My son got out of the car, looking tired and confused, followed by Meralda. Even in such a situation, she managed to look flawless. Neat hair, makeup, elegant dress. Only by the tense expression on her face could one realize that they were in trouble. Emiliano opened the trunk and started pulling out suitcases. There were a lot of them. 2 large suitcases, several bags, boxes of things. Apparently they had managed to take all the essentials from the apartment before the owner noticed. I went out into the yard to help with the stuff. Emiliano looked older than his 35 years. In recent years, he'd gotten noticeably fatter, his hair thinning at the top of his head. His work as a longshoreman was not easy for him. He lacked stamina, and his temper wasn't the same. Arturo always said that Emiliano was too soft for hard physical work, but his son had no other education. "Mom." Emiliano hugged me, and I smelled sweat and cheap cologne. "Thank you for accepting us." "Don't be silly," I said. "Let's get your stuff inside." Meralda stood beside the car, looking around my yard with a critical eye. Her lips were tightly pressed together, and her eyes were filled with ill-concealed displeasure. She was clearly expecting something different, even though it was not the first time she had been in my house. "Hello, Senora Vargas," she said dryly, nodding her head slightly. "I'm sorry to bother you." "It's okay, Meralda," I replied, trying to sound friendly. "Come on in the house and we'll get everything organized." We started to bring in our things. The suitcases were heavy. Meralda must have packed all her clothes and makeup. Emiliano dragged the boxes, sniffling and stopping every few steps. I took the lightest bags, though Meralda didn't offer to help. As we carried everything into the hallway, Meralda looked around with the expression of someone who'd entered an antique museum. Her gaze slid over the walls, the furniture, the floor, and I could see her barely restraining her comments. "Mother," Emiliano said, "we can get settled in any room. We don't want to disturb you." "Nonsense," I replied. "You'll take my bedroom, it's the most comfortable. I'll take the small room." "Maybe you shouldn't," said my son, but Meralda interrupted him. "Show us the bedroom, please." I led them into my room. It was the largest bedroom in the house, with a window to the garden. An old double bed with a wooden headboard, a closet, a chest of drawers with a mirror, bedside tables. All good, but old. The furniture was reminiscent of my parents' time. Meralda entered the room and paused in the middle, as if surveying the area. Her gaze lingered on the faded wallpaper, the worn carpet, the old-fashioned furniture. "There's no air conditioning in here," she said. "I don't have air conditioning in my house," I replied. "We use a fan in the summer." "Where is the fan?" she asked, looking around. "In the closet. I'll get it if you need it." Meralda went to the window and looked out. The view wasn't bad, a green garden, the neighbors' houses beyond it, and the mountains in the distance. But she didn't seem impressed. "Does the window face east?" she asked. "Yes," I answered. "It's very bright in the morning." "Then the sun will wake you up early," Meralda sighed. Emiliano stood in the doorway, clearly uncomfortable with his wife's behavior. He opened his mouth to say something, but Meralda beat him to it. "Where is the bathroom?" I showed them the bathroom. A small room with a shower, a sink, and a toilet. The tiles were old but clean. The mirror over the sink was a little darkened around the edges. There was a shelf for bath products, hooks for towels, everything I needed. "It's pretty cramped," Meralda said, peering inside. "And the shower cubicle is small." "It's fine for me," I said neutrally. "Is there hot water all the time?" "Yes, the water heater works fine." Meralda nodded, but I could tell by the look on her face that she wasn't happy about the conditions. We returned to the bedroom, where Emiliano had already started unpacking. "Mom, we don't feel comfortable kicking you out of your room," he said, pulling his shirts out of the suitcase. "It's okay," I said. "I need to make room in my closet. I'll move my stuff into the small room." I started taking my clothes out of the closet, dresses, blouses, skirts, a few, but enough for me. Meralda was watching me, and I could feel her gaze on the back of my neck. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. "Senora Vargas, don't you have more modern furniture?" "This is all my furniture," I answered as I continued to put things away. I inherited it from my parents. I see, Meralda said, as if to say, just as I thought. Emiliano blushed and gave her a warning glance but didn't say anything. Meanwhile, Meralda opened the closet doors wide and looked inside. Can the shelves be rearranged? She asked. I need more room for my dresses. We can try, I said. We'll ask Raimundo next time he comes. Who is Raimundo? Meralda asked. My brother. He's a locksmith. He can fix and rearrange furniture. Meralda nodded and continued to look around the room. She opened the drawers of the dresser, looked under the bed, even touched the mattress. The mattress is soft, she said. I have back problems. I need a firm one. You could put a board under it, I suggested. A board? Meralda looked at me as if I'd suggested she sleep on nails. No, a board won't help. You need an orthopedic mattress. Meralda, Emiliano said quietly, we're here temporarily. We need to get used to the conditions. I realize it's temporary, she replied, but there was irritation in her voice. But I need to sleep properly, or I won't be able to work. I packed up all my things and moved them into the small room. We used to use it as a closet, but there was an old bed there for guests. The room was tiny, a bed, a small table, a chair. The window looked out into the yard, but it was blocked by a big tree, so there wasn't much light. I spread my things out on the table and tried to lie down on the bed. The mattress was hard, and the springs creaked a little. But nothing. I could get used to it. The main thing was that my son and daughter-in-law were getting comfortable. When I returned to the bedroom, Meralda was already hanging her dresses in the closet. She had a lot of clothes, smart dresses, suits, blouses of different colors. Everything looked expensive and fashionable. Emiliano was arranging his things in the dresser, trying not to disturb his wife. Mama, he said, do you have an iron? I need to put things in order. Sure. The ironing board is in the pantry. Can I put it here in the bedroom? Meralda asked. I have to iron my clothes for work every morning. It's not much room, I said, but we'll try to make it work. We put the ironing board in the corner of the room. The space was really limited, but there was no other option. Meralda turned on the iron and started ironing one of her dresses. Do you have internet in your house? She asked, not taking her eyes off the dress. No, I answered. I don't need it. What do you mean you don't need it? Meralda was surprised. How do you get the news? How do you communicate with people? I watch the news on TV, I said. I talk to people in person. Meralda shook her head, clearly not understanding how one could live without the internet. It must have been as strange to her as living without electricity. I'll have to get it hooked up, she said. I need the internet for work. It's expensive, I said. How much is it? Emiliano asked. I don't know exactly. 5,000 a month, maybe. Emiliano and Meralda looked at each other. They clearly didn't expect to pay anything extra. We'll see, the son said uncertainly. By evening, they were more or less settled. Meralda hung up all her dresses, arranged her makeup on the dresser, arranged her shoes in the corner of the room. Emiliano put his clothes in the drawers of the dresser. The room got crowded, but they fit. I made dinner, rice and chicken and vegetable salad. We sat down at the table in the kitchen. The dining table had been designed for 4 people, but now it seemed small, especially when Meralda laid out her phone, napkins, and other small things. It's delicious, Emiliano said as he poured himself a second helping of rice. Thank you, Mom, Meralda added, but tasted only a little. May I ask what you usually cook? All sorts of things, I answered. Whatever's in the refrigerator. Do you buy meat often? 2 or 3 times a week. I can't afford it anymore. I see, Meralda said. Do you eat fish? Sometimes, when it's fresh from the store. Do you buy vegetables or grow them? Both. I grow tomatoes, peppers, herbs in the garden. The rest I buy. Meralda nodded, but I could see that she was not satisfied with my diet. Apparently, she was used to a more varied and expensive diet. After dinner, I washed the dishes while Emiliano and Meralda sat in the living room discussing their plans. I heard scraps of conversation, something about finding a new apartment, a job, money. Meralda's voice sounded unhappy, and Emiliano tried to calm her down. It's only temporary, he said. We'll get a better job, save money, get a decent apartment." "How long could it take?" Meralda replied. "I can't live like this for long." "You'll have to be patient. My mom is good, she'll help." "Your mom is nice, but her house is— Have you seen this bathroom? And the kitchen? It's all so old." I tried not to listen, but the walls were thin and the voices could be heard. I was embarrassed. Maybe I really am living too old-fashioned. Maybe it was time to update things around the house. After dinner, I decided to go to Esperanza's. I wanted to talk to my friend, to share the news, and the house was getting a little crowded with 3 people. "I'll go to the neighbors," I said to Emiliano. "The dishes are washed. You can rest." "Okay, Mom," my son replied. "We too will soon go to bed, tired for the day." Esperanza lived across the street. We'd been friends for 20 years, ever since she'd moved into the neighborhood. A widow like me, but more outgoing and energetic. She sold vegetables at the market, knew everyone in the neighborhood, was up to date on all the news and gossip. Esperanza's house was like mine, just as old, but better maintained. She loved flowers, and her front garden was full of roses and dahlias. There were always pots of geraniums on the veranda and lace curtains on the windows. "Adelaide," said Esperanza, opening the door. "Come in. I was just making tea." We sat down on the veranda with cups of tea and cookies. Esperanza was a full-figured woman with gray hair gathered in a bundle. Despite her 60 years, she retained the vivacity and curiosity of a young girl. "I heard your son came to see you," she said, pouring tea. "I saw the car in the yard." "Yes," I answered. "Emiliano and his wife. They were evicted from the apartment. They will stay with me." "Evicted?" Esperanza was surprised. "Why?" "Rent arrears. They hadn't paid for 3 months." Esperanza shook her head. "Oh, the young people of today. They live beyond their means and then they are surprised." "Come on, Esperanza. Everyone has difficulties." "Difficulties are one thing," said her friend, sipping her tea. "Irresponsibility is another. How can you go 3 months without paying your rent?" I shrugged. I didn't understand how it had gotten to this point either, but it didn't matter now. The important thing was to help my son out of the situation. "And how is Meralda?" Esperanza asked. "How did she take the move?" "She's fine," I answered, though it wasn't quite true. Of course, she's not used to it after the rented apartment. "Adelaide," Esperanza looked at me seriously, "do you know what they say about your sister-in-law?" "What do they say?" I was wary. That she is not an ordinary girl. Proud, arrogant. My neighbor Dolores works in the same mall where Meralda has her store. She says she doesn't talk to any of the salespeople, keeps to herself. "Maybe she's just shy," I suggested. "Shy?" Esperanza snorted. "Adelaide, I've seen her walking around town. She's got her nose up, looking down at people, and the way she dresses. You can't buy a dress on your son's salary." "Maybe she has savings," I said, feeling that I was standing up for my daughter-in-law. "What savings if you can't pay the rent?" Esperanza said reasonably. "No, Adelaide, there's something wrong. I'd be more careful if I were you." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I mean that your daughter-in-law is used to living a nice life, but she doesn't like to work for it. And now she's in your house. Don't let her start bossing you around." "Esperanza, you're exaggerating," I said. "This is a family, my son and his wife. Sure, we may have different habits, but we'll find common ground." "God willing," my friend sighed. "But you know me. I always say what I think, and I think you'll have problems with this girl." "Why are you so sure about her?" I wondered. Maybe she's changed since she got married. "People don't change, Adelaide," Esperanza shook her head. "Especially people like your sister-in-law. She's been used to being owed everything since she was a child. Her parents spoiled her, she was the local beauty at school, the boys chased her. And now life has shown its teeth, and she doesn't like it." We sat in silence, sipping tea. Esperanza had always been blunt, but she was usually right in her assessments of people. She had a good instinct for human characters. "Okay," I said finally. "We'll see. Maybe you're not right this time." "Maybe," Esperanza agreed. "I'd be glad to be wrong. But you take care of yourself, Adelaide. Don't let yourself be bossed around." I got home about 10 o'clock at night. The light was on in the living room, but Emiliano and Meralda had already gone to bed. I walked quietly into the kitchen, checked to make sure the gas was off, and locked the front door. Muffled voices could be heard in the bedroom. Emiliano and Meralda were talking about something, but I couldn't make out the words. Meralda's tone was unhappy, and Emiliano was trying to calm her down. I walked to my new room and lay down on the hard bed. The springs creaked under my weight. It was unusual to sleep somewhere else after 8 years in my bedroom. But I'd get used to it. A muffled conversation continued behind the wall. Then it went quiet. I lay in the dark and thought about Esperanza's words. Maybe she's right, and I really will have a problem with my daughter-in-law. But this is a family, and I have to try to mend relations. Things will be different in the morning, I decided. We'll get used to each other. We'll find common ground. The main thing is to help Emiliano get back on his feet and find a new place to live. And then we'll see. The first changes in the house began on the 3rd day of their stay. I woke up in the morning to the sound of moving furniture in the living room. I got dressed and went out to see what was going on. Meralda, in her robe, was moving my old dresser from the window to the opposite wall. "Good morning," I said. "Is something wrong?" "Good morning, Señora Vargas," she replied without stopping her work. "I'm rearranging the furniture. Everything here is not very conveniently arranged." "Why?" I wondered. "You see, the dresser is blocking the passage to the window, and the sofa is so uncomfortable to watch TV, I'm just tidying up." Emiliano sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and watched his wife's actions. When I looked at him, he shrugged as if to say, "What can I do?" "Meralda," I said gently, "I liked the way the furniture was before." "But it's much more practical," she said, pushing the dresser into its new place. "Look, now you can walk to the window and you can see the TV from wherever you are on the couch." I looked at the result of her work. Indeed, from a practical point of view, the arrangement had become more convenient. But the dresser had been there for 20 years, and it was strange to see it in a different corner. "Of course, if you don't like it, you can put it back the way it was," Meralda added, but I could hear the displeasure in her voice. "No, okay," I sighed. "Maybe it really is better this way." Emiliano exhaled in relief. Apparently he was afraid of conflict between his wife and mother. The next day, Meralda took over the kitchen. I came back from the store and found that half of my dishes had disappeared from the shelves. In place of the old plates and cups were new, brightly colored, modern ones. "Meralda, where are my dishes?" I asked. "I put them in the lower cabinets," she said, dusting the shelves. "I put ours in. See how nice it looks?" My old dishes were simple, white, but they were good. It served me for many years, and not a single plate broke. Meralda's new dishes were bright with floral patterns, but they looked cheap. "Why would you take mine away?" I asked. "Yours is very old," Meralda explained, "and not very pretty. It's better to use modern dishes. I kept yours in case something broke." I opened the bottom cabinet. There, stacked in stacks, were my plates and cups, like a spare, for a rainy day. "I liked my dishes," I said. "But this is much prettier," Meralda insisted, "and more practical. Look, the plates are big, deep, comfortable." I took one of the new plates. It was light, thin, with an eye-catching pattern, not what I was used to. "Mom," Emiliano intervened, "Meralda just wants the house to be beautiful. Is that a bad thing?" "No, of course not," I replied, feeling guilty. "It's just unfamiliar." "You can get used to anything," Meralda smiled. "It's all about willingness." A few days later, she started working on my kitchen utensils. She replaced the old wooden spoons with plastic ones. I hid the cast-iron skillet I'd been using for 15 years and replaced it with a Teflon one. "Señora Vargas," she said, showing me the new pan. "Look how comfortable it is. Nothing burns, easy to clean. Your old frying pan is so heavy and hard to clean." I got my cast-iron skillet from my mom. It made the best pancakes and fried potatoes. But Meralda was right. It was really hard to clean. "Where is it now?" I asked. "In the pantry," said Meralda. "If you really want it, you can use it." But I knew that if I said anything against it, I would look like a stubborn old woman who didn't want to accept new things. Emiliano had already hinted several times that I was too conservative and afraid of change. The most unpleasant part started when Meralda took over the groceries. I came back from the market with the usual purchases: potatoes, onions, carrots, some meat, bread. Meralda looked at my purchases and shook her head. "Senora Vargas, can't you buy better quality products?" she asked. "What's wrong with these?" I wondered. "Well, the meat is kind of stringy, the vegetables are not very fresh, and the bread, can't you buy good bread from the bakery?" "This bread isn't bad either," I said. "And cheaper." "But we don't just eat bread," Meralda said. "It's important to eat a nutritious diet. We need fruit, fish, good quality dairy products. All these things are expensive," I explained. "My pension is small." "I understand," Meralda nodded. "But there are 3 of us now. Maybe we should reconsider the budget." I didn't understand what she meant. Emiliano didn't work regularly, and neither did Meralda. They didn't have the money, or I wouldn't have it. "What was the budget?" I asked. "Well, we can chip in for groceries," Meralda suggested. "I'll give you the money and you buy whatever you need to eat properly." "You have money?" I was surprised. "A little," she said evasively, "for the bare necessities." The next day, Meralda gave me 2,000 pesos and a grocery list. The list included expensive meats, imported cheeses, and exotic fruits I had never bought in my life. "This is very expensive," I said, looking at the list. "But it's delicious and healthy," Meralda replied. "I can't eat cheap food. My stomach is sensitive." I went to the store with her list. I could only buy half of the items with the money I had been given. When I got home, Meralda looked at the purchases with displeasure. "Where's the rest?" she asked. "There wasn't enough money," I explained. "But I had given 2,000. "For these groceries, you need 4,000 at least." Meralda sighed and took more money out of her purse. This time it was enough, but I was horrified to think how much it would cost to eat like this every week. Emiliano began to change at this time. He used to be calm, but he was also unresponsive. Now he began to drink in the evenings. At first a little, a bottle of beer after work, then more, 2 bottles, then something stronger. "Emiliano, why do you drink?" I asked him once when he was sitting in the kitchen with a bottle of vodka. "I was relaxing after a hard day," he answered without looking up. "But you didn't drink before." "There wasn't much before," he muttered. "Now I do." I didn't know what he meant. Problems, stress, or just the impact of new circumstances. "Maybe we should call it a night," I suggested, watching him pour himself another shot. "Mom," he said sharply, "don't tell me how to live my life. I'm a grown man." I'd never heard rudeness in his voice before. Emiliano was always polite, even when he disagreed. And here he was talking as if I were interrupting him. "I'm just worried about your health," I said. "Let my wife worry about my health," he said. "You stay out of it." Meralda was sitting in the living room watching TV, pretending not to hear our conversation. But I could see that she was pleased that her son had taken her side against his mother. Gradually, Emiliano became more and more rude and inattentive. He used to help me around the house, but now he wouldn't even clean up after himself. He left dirty dishes on the table, threw his clothes around, didn't take out the trash. "Emiliano, can you take out the bucket?" I asked him. "Later," he answered, not taking his eyes off the TV. "It's already full." "Mom, I'm tired at work. Let me rest." But he would rest until the evening, and then he would start drinking. And the bucket stayed full until I took it out myself. One day I asked him to help me move a closet in my small room. I wanted to make it more comfortable so I could have more room. "I can't," he said. "It hurts my back." "But it's not that hard, it's only half a meter." "Mom," he said irritably, "you have to understand young people. We have our own problems, our own worries. Don't pester us with trifles." "What worries?" I was surprised. "You work 3 days a week and stay at home the rest of the time." "Exactly!" Emiliano flared up. "I work for pennies because I have no education, and you make claims." "I'm not complaining, I'm just asking for help." "Mom, you're too old-fashioned," he said, apparently repeating Meralda's words. "You have to realize that times have changed. Young people live differently. I didn't understand what times and old-fashionedness had to do with it. Is helping my mother move a closet a relic of the past?" Meralda was becoming more and more independent. She set her own rules in the house and expected me to follow them. For example, she decided that the living room should be quiet after 10 p.m. because she had to get up early for work. "Senora Vargas," she said as I watched the evening show, "can we turn it down? I'm having a sensitive sleep." I turned the sound down. The next day she asked me not to turn on the TV at all after 10. "But this is my house," I said, "and my TV." "Of course," Meralda agreed. "But we all live here now. We have to respect everyone's needs." It sounded reasonable, but for some reason only her needs were taken into account, and mine were not. Things got even worse with the cooking. Meralda decided she would cook for herself and Emiliano. She wouldn't cook for me. "Senora Vargas," she explained, "my husband and I have a special diet. We can't eat fatty and heavy foods, and you must be used to simple food." "What do you mean, simple?" "I don't understand." "Well, potatoes, pasta, bread, elderly food. I've been cooking the same things I've been cooking all my life, the same dishes that the whole family ate. But now it turns out it was not suitable food for the young." Meralda cooked herself elaborate meals with expensive foods. Fish and sauce, meat with exotic spices, salads of imported vegetables. She put 2 plates on the table for herself and Emiliano, but nothing for me. "What should I eat?" I asked the first time it happened. "Oh, I'm sorry," Meralda said as if she'd realized. "I thought you were going to cook for yourself. We have different tastes." I went into the kitchen and made myself some macaroni and cheese. I sat at the table alone while they ate dinner in the living room, discussing the flavors and plans for tomorrow. The next day, the same thing happened again. And the next. Meralda cooked for 2, and I fed myself. When I tried to go to the stove, she would say, "Senora Vargas, please wait. I haven't finished yet. Then cook whatever you want." The stove was busy for hours. Meralda cooked complicated dishes that took a long time to prepare. By the time she cleared the kitchen, I didn't have the energy to cook anything. "Emiliano," I said to my son, "why doesn't my wife cook for the whole family?" "Mom," he replied, clearly inebriated, "Meralda works. She gets tired. She cooks for us because we are young. We need to eat well. And you're used to simple food." "But I live in this house too." "You do," he agreed, "and no one's kicking you out. But everyone has their own needs. You can't expect everyone to accommodate you." "I'm not demanding that they do," I said indignantly. "I just want a decent meal in my own home." "Mom, you're doing it again," Emiliano sighed. "Why can't you be more flexible? Times have changed. People live differently. It's times and flexibility all over again. It turned out that I had to adapt to their rules in my own house, and they didn't go along with anything. Gradually, I began to feel like a stranger in my own home. Meralda ruled the kitchen, the living room, even the bathroom. She set her own rules, rearranged the furniture, changed the routine. "Senora Vargas," she would say, "may I put my flowers on the windowsill? Yours are a little dull." My flowers had been growing on windowsills for years, unpretentious geraniums and violets that required minimal care. Meralda brought some exotic plants in beautiful pots. "But my flowers have been here a long time," I said. "Sure, but look how beautiful they'll look," she insisted. "You can put yours somewhere else." There was no other place. My flowers went into a small room where they lacked light. Meralda's expensive plants were on the windowsills. Emiliano supported his wife in everything. If I tried to object or express my opinion, he immediately met her defense. "Mom, Meralda just wants to make the house more beautiful," he said. "Is that a bad thing?" "But it's my house," I reminded him. "It's ours too, as long as we live here," he replied. "We have to compromise." But for some reason, it was always me who had to compromise. Meralda never compromised, and I had to understand the young people and not be so old-fashioned. One evening, I was trying to watch my favorite show. Meralda came into the living room and changed the channel. "Excuse me," she said, "but the program that Emiliano and I are watching is starting now." "But I've already watched my show," I objected. "We agreed to watch this program," Emiliano intervened. "Mom, you can watch the show tomorrow. Why me and not you?" "Because we are working and can only watch now," explained Meralda, "and you can watch at any time of the day." I got up and went to my room. There was no TV in the small room, only a radio. I turned on some music and sat on my bed, feeling banished from my own living room. Emiliano and Miralda's voices could be heard over the wall. They were laughing about something on the program, discussing what they had seen. I sat alone in the dark room and thought about how quickly my life had changed. A month ago, I was the mistress of my house, cooking what I wanted, watching what I wanted, arranging the furniture as I pleased. Now I felt unwelcome, tolerated out of pity. Emiliano was becoming more and more alien. The alcohol had changed his character. He became irritable, inattentive, selfish. He supported his wife in everything, even when she was wrong. And Miralda, she acted like the new mistress of the house. She made the rules, ruled the space, ignored my needs, and she pretended it was all natural and fair. I lay on the narrow bed and listened to the sound of the TV from the living room. My TV, my living room, my house. But somehow none of it belonged to me anymore. The final straw was Saturday. Miralda announced that she was inviting her friends over for coffee. I didn't mind, after all. People have a right to socialize, but what happened next exceeded all my expectations. The friends arrived around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. 3 young women about the same age as Miralda, all dressed up with bright manicures and expensive handbags. It was clear from their appearance that they were accustomed to comfort and were not familiar with economy. "Girls, come in," Miralda greeted them at the door. "This is our temporary home. Temporary home." I shuddered at those words. My home, where I'd lived half my life, was just a temporary home to her. My friends were in the living room, taking up the entire couch and armchairs. They were laughing loudly, discussing the news, criticizing mutual acquaintances. Voices were ringing throughout the house. Music was playing at full volume. I was in the kitchen, making myself a late lunch. Miralda came in and said, "Señora Vargas, can you make coffee for my girlfriends? And maybe something for tea?" "You have hands," I replied as I continued to chop vegetables for the salad. "But I'm a hostess. I have guests," Miralda objected. "I don't feel comfortable leaving them alone." "And I'm not the hostess?" I asked, turning to her. "Of course you are," she agreed quickly. "But you understand. I didn't understand anything except that they were trying to turn me into a servant." But I didn't want to argue. I put the coffee pot on the stove and took out the cookies I'd bought with my own money. When I brought the tray into the living room, Miralda's friends didn't even thank me. One of them, a full blonde in a bright pink dress, looked at the cups critically. "Miralda, don't you have nicer dishes?" "These aren't my dishes," Miralda explained. "We are temporarily staying at my mother-in-law's house." "Oh, yes," the blonde nodded. "That makes sense. Understand what? That an old woman's house can't have beautiful dishes?" I put the tray on the table and headed for the exit. "Señora Vargas," Miralda called out to me, "can you bring more sugar?" "And napkins." I brought sugar and napkins. Then I was asked to bring more spoons. Then I was asked for cookie plates. Each time I went to and from the kitchen like a waitress in a restaurant. My friends sat and discussed their business without paying attention to me. Only when they needed something, Miralda would command, "Señora Vargas, please bring it." I felt like a servant in my own house. But I kept silent, not wanting to cause a scandal in front of strangers. The party dragged on into the evening. My friends ordered pizza without asking my permission. Then they opened a bottle of wine one of them had brought. The music played louder and laughter became more and more raucous. Emiliano came home from work around 6 in the evening, already quite drunk. Seeing the company in the living room, he joined in the fun. Miralda introduced him to her friends as my husband, but she didn't introduce me to anyone. "Emiliano, sit down," invited one of the friends. "Tell me something interesting." My son sat down in the chair and started telling jokes, naughty, silly stories that he had never told in my presence before. My friends squealed with laughter. Miralda clapped her hands. I retreated to my room, but the sounds of merriment came through the walls. Around 8 p.m., someone knocked on my door. "Señora Vargas," it was Miralda. "We're a little hungry. Can you cook something?" "Cook what?" I asked. "Well, something quick. Sandwiches, appetizers. The girls are used to good food." "I don't have enough food for 5 people, I said. "But there's something, isn't there?" Miralda insisted. Bread, sausage, cheese? I had groceries, but not much. I planned to go to the store tomorrow, but it was embarrassing to refuse in front of the guests. I went to the kitchen and started making sandwiches. Meralda stood next to me and commanded, "Butter the bread a little thicker. Don't spare the sausage. Can you slice the pickles?" I cut, I buttered, I decorated. Meralda watched, but she didn't lift a finger. "Make it pretty," she said. Girls like things to be aesthetically pleasing. When the sandwiches were ready, I brought them into the living room. My friends pounced on the food, loudly discussing the taste and appearance. "Not bad," one of them said. "It could be better, though." "Yes," agreed the other. "No drinks? Juice? Lemonade?" "Señora Vargas," Meralda said to me, "do we have anything to drink?" "Water, tea, coffee," I answered. "And anything more interesting?" asked the blonde in the pink dress. "No," I answered briefly. "Too bad," she said. "We're used to variety." I went back to the kitchen to wash the dishes. The living room was cluttered with plates, cups, bottles. There were crumbs on the table, spilled wine. The couch cushions were lying on the floor. Around 10 p.m., I heard another knock on the door. "Señora Vargas," it was Meralda again. "We need to clean up the living room. The girls will be leaving soon." "Let the ones who littered clean it up," I said. "But they're guests," Meralda objected. "It's not convenient to ask guests to clean up." "Is it convenient to ask me?" "You live here all the time," she explained as if she were talking to a child. "You'll have to clean tomorrow anyway." I got out of bed and went into the living room. The picture was depressing. There was wine on the table, papers and crumbs on the floor. There were cigarette butts in the ashtray, even though no one smoked in my house. "Who smoked?" I asked. "One of my friends," Meralda answered. She couldn't help herself. "No one smokes in my house? Why do you worry so much about nothing?" Meralda dismissed it. "I smoked once, but it didn't poison your apartment." I started cleaning, clenching my teeth with anger. I picked up cigarette butts, wiped up spilled wine, washed plates. My friends sat and watched me, still talking about their own business. "Meralda," said one of them, "is your mother-in-law always so obliging?" "Yes, she's nice," Meralda replied. "She helps with the chores. She helps with chores. In my own house, I'm helpful." "How long are you going to live here?" another friend asked. "Until we find something suitable," Meralda answered. "But we are in no hurry. It's not bad here, and it's not expensive. Inexpensive. Because they didn't pay for anything. Not for utilities, not for food, not for lodging." The friends finally left around 11 o'clock in the evening. They said goodbye noisily, promising to come again. Meralda walked them to the gate and then returned to the house. "There," she said, sitting down on the sofa. "We had a good time." I stood in the middle of the living room with a rag in my hands, surrounded by the mess. "Meralda," I said, "next time you invite guests over, give me a little more notice." "Why?" she wondered. "We weren't in the way." "What do you mean? The music at full volume, the smoking, the mess." "Señora Vargas?" Meralda stood up from the couch and looked down at me. "You're forgetting something." "What am I forgetting?" "You're forgetting that we live here, and we have the right to invite friends over." "This is my house." I was indignant. "It's your home, but it's our home too, as long as we're here," Meralda said calmly, "and we won't ask permission for every step." "I don't require permission for every step, but basic respect." "Respect?" Meralda laughed. "Where is your respect for us? We are young people, we need socializing, entertainment, and you demand that we sit quietly like mice." "I demand that I not be turned into a servant." "A servant?" Meralda acted surprised. "Who's turning you into a servant? We just asked you to help with the guests." "Asked? You gave orders. Fetch this, fetch that, clean this place." "Señora Vargas," Meralda's voice turned cold, "don't you forget who helps who here?" "What do you mean?" "I mean that if it weren't for us, you'd be sitting here alone like an old rat in a hole, needed by no one, loved by no one. And we made you feel useful." The words hit like a slap in the face. Emiliano sat in a chair with a bottle of beer and remained silent, not interfering in the conversation. "Emiliano," I turned to my son, "do you hear what your wife is saying?" "Mom," he mumbled without looking up, Don't make a scene." "I'm not making a scene. I demand respect in my own house." "In your own house," Meralda mocked. "And who told you that you're in charge here?" "Who said what? This is my house." "Yes, your home," agreed Meralda. "But you're a nobody. An old, useless woman who should be grateful to be tolerated here at all." Silence hung in the air. Even the drunken Emiliano raised his head and looked at his wife. "No one," Meralda repeated, looking me in the eye. "Do you understand? You are nobody here. And if you don't like it, you can look for another place to live." I stood there, holding the wet rag in my hands, and I felt something breaking inside. Not my heart. My heart had been hurting for a long time. My patience was breaking. The willingness to forgive and justify everything was breaking. "Meralda," Emiliano said quietly, "you're too much what?" His wife turned to him. "Too honest? Your mother is used to everyone dancing around her. It's time to explain to her how things really are." I silently put the rag on the table and went to my room. I closed the door, sat on the bed, and breathed for a few minutes. It was pounding in my head. No one, old fool, should be grateful. Then she got up, walked over to the closet, and pulled out her keys from the far corner. The spare house keys I'd been hiding in case the main ones got lost. I clenched them in my fist and walked back into the living room. Meralda was sitting on the couch, telling Emiliano something about her friends. Her son was half listening, finishing his beer. When I walked in, they didn't even look in my direction. I approached Meralda and held out my hand. "The keys." "What keys?" She didn't understand. "The keys to my house. Give them to me." "Why would you do that?" Meralda was surprised. "Because you don't live here anymore," I said calmly. "Good luck finding a new place to live. You have 3 days." Meralda stared at me wide-eyed. Emiliano looked up too, not immediately realizing what was going on. "What?" Meralda asked again. "The keys to the house," I repeated. "Immediately." "Are you out of your mind?" Meralda jumped up from the couch. "What 3 days? We're not going anywhere." "Yes, you are," I said, and took the keys from her, which were on the table. "Pack your things and get out." "Mom!" Emiliano finally woke up. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done a long time ago," I answered, "protecting my home from people who think I'm nothing." "This is family," exclaimed the son. "Family doesn't call each other nobody," I said. "A family doesn't turn a mother into a servant. A family doesn't take over someone else's house and dictate its own rules." Meralda stood there with her mouth open, clearly not believing what was happening. "You can't kick us out," she declared. "We live here." "We lived here," I corrected her. "And now you'll be looking for a new place. You have 3 days to pack your things and find a place to live." "I'm not going anywhere," Meralda shouted. "This is our home too." Chapter 5. After Meralda had said she wasn't going anywhere, I realized that words alone would not do the trick. Emiliano sat in his chair with cloudy eyes, clearly not intending to interfere. But my sister-in-law had already begun to order as if nothing had happened. "Emiliano, go to bed," she commanded. "And tomorrow we'll talk to your mother in a human way. We'll talk." After calling me nothing, she was going to talk to me like a human being. "I'm going to see Raimundo," I said. "Let's see what he has to say about your behavior." "To your uncle, the locksmith?" Meralda snorted. "Do you think he'll support you? Men always stick together. She was wrong. Raimundo never tolerated rudeness or injustice, especially to his family." I threw on a sweater and left the house. It was already dark outside, but Raimundo's neighborhood wasn't far away. A 15-minute walk through familiar yards and alleys. Raimundo had lights burning in the windows. He sat with a newspaper, sipping tea. "Adelaide?" He was surprised when he opened the door. "What happened?" I told him everything. About Meralda taking over the house, turning me into a servant, about today's humiliation in front of my friends. How she called me a nobody and an old fool. Raimundo's face grew increasingly grim. When I finished, he stood up and walked silently into the hallway. "Raimundo, what are you doing?" I asked. "I'm going to talk to your guests," he answered, pulling out his toolbox. "Explain to them what respect for their elders means." "Maybe you don't have to." "Yes, Adelaide." Some people only understand strength. We walked to my house. Raimundo was carrying a heavy box, and I could see my brother was very determined. The lights were on in the house. There were voices coming from the living room. Miralda was telling Emiliano something. We entered quietly. In the living room, Emiliano was lying on the sofa with a bottle, and Miralda was commanding from the bedroom. "Emiliano, turn off the TV and go to bed. We have to get up early tomorrow." She commanded me in my house as if she were the boss. Raimundo put the toolbox on the floor with a loud thud and entered the living room. "Hello, nephew," he said. Emiliano looked up with cloudy eyes. "Uncle Raimundo? Why are you here?" "I came for you," Raimundo answered briefly. "Get up." "Why get up?" Emiliano didn't understand. "Because you don't live here anymore." Miralda jumped out of the bedroom in her robe. "What's going on here? Who's making noise?" "I'm the one making the noise," Raimundo answered, looking her over from head to toe. "So you're the smart girl who calls my sister a nobody? And who are you to tell me what to do?" Miralda asked defiantly. "I'm the one who will throw you out of here," Raimundo replied calmly. "Pack your bags." "Ha!" laughed Miralda. "And how will you throw me out? By force?" "That's right." Raimundo nodded and walked towards Emiliano. "Uncle, wait," mumbled his nephew, trying to get up from the couch. "We'll make a deal." "We already have a deal." Raimundo cut him off, grabbed Emiliano by the scruff of his shirt, and yanked him to his feet. "Hey!" Emiliano shrieked. "What are you doing?" "What your father should have done if he were alive," Raimundo replied, and dragged his nephew toward the exit. Emiliano tried to resist, but he was drunk and weak. Raimundo dragged him like a sack of potatoes. "Let go!" Emiliano shouted. "I'll go myself!" "It's too late for you," said his uncle, dragging him out into the yard. "You should have thought of that sooner." Miralda stood in the doorway and shrieked, "Madmen! I'll report them to the police! This is assault!" "Report it," Raimundo said over his shoulder. "Tell them how you took over someone else's house." He dragged Emiliano to the gate and threw him to the ground. "Sit here and don't move," he ordered. "I'll get your wife." Raimundo went back into the house. Miralda had managed to run into the bedroom and locked herself in there. "Open the door," he said calmly. "I won't," she shouted from inside. "Go away! This is our house!" "I'm going to count to 3, Raimundo warned. 1, silence. 2, "I'm not getting out. I have a license." 3, Raimundo said and kicked the door. The door cracked, but it held. A second blow tore it off its hinges. Miralda screamed in the corner of the room, clutching a pillow to her. "There," Raimundo said, entering the room. "You could have come out on your own." "Don't touch me!" shrieked Miralda. "Help! They're killing me!" "Nobody's killing you," Raimundo said tiredly. "You're just being run over." He grabbed Miralda by the leg and dragged her from the room. She clung to the furniture, screaming, scratching, but Raimundo was much stronger. "Let go!" she screamed. "I'm a woman! You can't do that!" "Yes," Raimundo replied, dragging her across the floor. "When a woman behaves like a pig, she is treated like one." Miralda struggled like a fish on ice, but Raimundo methodically dragged her through the living room, through the hallway, into the street. Her robe was torn, her hair disheveled, her face red from screaming. "Help!" she screamed. "I'm being killed!" "Hush!" said Raimundo, dragging her to the gate. The neighbors were asleep. He threw Miralda next to Emiliano. She sat on the ground, sobbing and cursing everyone. "Now the things," Raimundo said and went back into the house. He methodically gathered their clothes, cosmetics, shoes, everything that belonged to the uninvited tenants. He carried them out in armfuls and threw them by the gate. "Careful!" Miralda shouted. "There's expensive stuff in there." "You should have thought of that before," answered Raimundo, throwing another bag. Emiliano tried to stand up. "Uncle, enough already." "Sit down," Raimundo shouted. "And don't move, or you'll fly again." He took out all their things, suitcases, bags, even the expensive dishes that Miralda was so proud of. "This is it," he said, dropping the last bag. "Welcome to independent life." "We won't forgive you for this," shouted Miralda, getting up from the ground. "We'll sue you. We'll put you in jail." "Try it," Raimundo replied indifferently. But first explain to the judge why you have illegally occupied someone else's house." "Emiliano is the landlady's son," Miralda was indignant. "An adult son," Raimundo corrected. "He should provide for himself, not sit on his mother's neck." Emiliano was silent, his head downcast. Apparently, even in his drunken state, he realized that his uncle was right. "You beasts!" shouted Miralda. "Inhuman beasts, throwing people out on the street." "You throw garbage on the street," said Raimundo, "and people are asked to behave. You chose the first option." "We'll get revenge on you," Miralda yelled, picking up the scattered things. "Everyone will know what you're like." "Let them know," Raimundo shrugged. "Tell everyone how you took over someone else's house and insulted an old woman." He helped Emiliano load his things into the car. The nephew was grim and angry, but he dared not argue. "Uncle," he said, getting behind the wheel, "you're wrong." "You will understand when you live," answered Raimundo. "In the meantime, get out and don't come back until you learn to respect your mother." Miralda was the last one to get into the car, still shouting, "You will answer for this! We'll find a place to live, and we'll show everyone what kind of creatures you are. Good luck with your search," Raimundo said, and slammed the gate as the car pulled out. He put the heavy lock on the gate and turned to me. "If they try to come back, call the police at once. No more pity." "Thank you," I said. "I couldn't have done it without you." "This is a family matter," my brother said. "You have to protect your family from boorish people, even if those boorish people are your relatives." We went back to the house. It seemed huge and quiet after the weeks we'd spent with uninvited tenants. We temporarily propped the broken bedroom door with a chair. "I'll fix it tomorrow," Raimundo promised. "Now get some rest." He left around midnight. I was alone in my house, which was mine again. It was quiet, peaceful. No one commanded, no one yelled, no one demanded that I clean up after myself. The next evening, I went to Esperanza's house. My friend met me with curiosity. "Well, tell me, what happened there yesterday? The whole neighborhood heard the screams." I told her how Raimundo had dragged Emiliano and Miralda out of the house. "He did the right thing," Esperanza approved. "I told you, some people are understood only by force. Words can't negotiate with them." "Only Emiliano is a pity," I sighed. "Don't feel sorry for him." She shook her head. "He's a grown man. He chose this life for himself. Maybe now he'll wise up." We sat and drank tea in the usual silence. Birds were chirping outside the window. Children were playing somewhere. "You know, Adelaide," Esperanza said, "you did the right thing. Home is sacred, and no one has the right to take over someone else's home and rule in it." Raimundo used to say the same thing. "Smart man, your brother, and strong too. It's good you have that protection." "Yes, I agree." "Good. Now my house was my home again. Quiet, peaceful, cozy, where no one would command, humiliate, or set their own rules. And if someone tried to take over my place again, I knew who to call for help.